All right, footy's back. It was a very nice, but a little bit of a weird feeling heading to bed on the Friday night, knowing that we'd be waking up to some footy on Saturday morning. Obviously, the preseason fixture, the unofficial preseason fixture has been and gone now, and we're going to wrap up what we saw when the Eagles took the field over in Coburn, taking on the crosstown rivals Fremantle in 4 quarters that were televised of match simulation. There was also a little bit more of a hit out post that with some of the second team players. So finally some competitive footy to deconstruct. Looking forward to this one. It's been a little while since our last podcast. I've been gallivanting around New South Wales, but it's good to be back and we're ready to fire things back up and steamroll into what's going to be a really exciting season. I think we saw plenty of exciting signs, or at least enough on Saturday to really get us excited for the season ahead. Only a couple of weeks away from proper in-season football, so looking forward to that. Today we'll just do a quick summary of what we saw, touch on some of the standout players and then a few of the positives, a few of the negatives. I think that each club probably got through reasonably unscathed and got out of the hit out what they would have set out to achieve. Obviously, it was it put a real dampener on it to see Noah Long go down with a horrific knee injury. The club's going to take their time. They'll obviously throw their arms around him and support him through this next phase, and he will have been for scans, I'd assume, already and be receiving some treatment on that. It didn't look great. For those of you who've seen the vision, obviously his knee was completely bent back the other way underneath him, so probably would have snapped a heap of different things without wanting to speak out of term. If I'm not really familiar with what that injury might be, whether or not there's some ACL, PCL, MCL damage in there. I'd have to assume there probably would be, but if someone in the comments knows what that injury tends to be, sort of like a hyperextension or just a complete snapping, horrific anyway, and really feel for young Longy. He was having a really good game as well and featuring in the best 23, so it looked like he was in line for a round 1 start and as I said, performing really well as that sort of link pressure half forward, so contract year as well. It was a real shame to see that because I thought for the rest of the game we managed to get through pretty unscathed. Obviously, we took out Tyler Young and Harry Edwards, our 2 key defensive pillars at the halfway mark, and just sort of ticked them off. Didn't want to put them under any unnecessary risk. And then also Jake Waterman came out at 3/4 time unscathed after what was a pretty tough day for the West Coast tall forwards. So from an injury perspective, I think that was the only major blue that we had. Obviously, Harley looked a little bit sore, but I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. At least the club hasn't been forthcoming with that. So obviously a few absentees, which we're hoping to hear some more light on. Liam Baker was out, probably just managed after State of Origin. Ruben Jinby sounds like he's got a bit of a foot niggle. We've got no idea the complexity of that because the club hasn't shared with us yet, but hopefully that isn't too far away. Brady Hoff still being managed through his recovery with that lower leg issue. Brendan Starcevic as well. I don't know if it was the knee or if something else has popped up, maybe a calf for him, but that's a shame because he's had a pretty streamlined preseason apart from that. But those were some of the absentees. I think Jack Graham was missing as well, but apart from that, pretty much a full strength lineup, which was really exciting. And Minnie gave away a few positional changes, which we'll no doubt touch on throughout this podcast. But as I said, I feel like both teams sort of got out of it what they wanted. West Coast obviously got off to a really strong start, which I was sort of hoping for. Freo obviously in a pretty good position heading into this season, and they were always going to have our measures. So there probably was a little bit less in it for them. And in the first couple of quarters, they were clearly just trying to tick off some ball movement, get the match fitness up, get the miles in the legs, and they definitely seemed a lot less invested in that first quarter. Players like Andy Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong in and around the ball, they were missing tackles and losing contested one-on-ones, which they'd normally win, and it wasn't until later on in the second to third, and definitely in the fourth quarter where they really put the foot down and got a bit closer toward that max effort, which we'd normally come to expect from Freo. So I was hoping the boys would get off to a good start. Obviously, a little bit more in it for them. They want to try and prove to themselves that they can take it up against some stronger opposition. And we saw some really positive signs in that first quarter particularly, but I think that the first half as a whole was really positive. And if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend jumping on KO and watching back that first quarter, probably the first half. It was a really good showing. Obviously, we saw some of the young guns getting into it early with Willem Dersma just unloading from 50 for a massive goal to get things started, and then Cooper Duff-Tyler not long after that, kicking the second. That was really exciting. I thought some of our new additions, Josh Lindsay looked really good off halfback at stages. Dev Robertson in the midfield was looking really good, and Tom McCarthy as well. And it just got me thinking about how many fresh faces we have, not just to the team, but also just to the lineup. We've got some new faces in the midfield, some of these new draftees coming in, and just more talent to add to the list. And when you think about the team we rolled out last year for round 1 and then the team that we'll roll out this year for round 1, all of those fresh faces, it really does get you excited, and you can see that the club is moving forward, which I think just really put it into perspective. I caught a little bit of the North Melbourne preseason game, and I was looking at North's lineup, and they obviously got belted by Melbourne, who I don't think anyone really expects is going to do too much damage this year. And looking at that North Melbourne side and reading some comments from some supporters on social media there, they feel like they've been a little bit stagnant throughout the off-season period, and I don't think they've made too many adjustments to their list to suggest that there's going to be improvement on the cards for them. But that's a complete contrast when you look at West Coast bringing in all these fresh faces and addressing a lot of holes in the list with athleticism and skill and defensive intent in the midfield, things like that. I think we really got to see in that first half of footy what these fresh faces are going to do for the club, not just this year, but for a long time going forward, obviously, with some of those really exciting draftees. So in totality, I think it was a positive game. There were more positives than there were negatives, but we'll run through some of those key talking points in just a moment. Just wanted to touch on some of the standout players because I think there are a few that definitely deserved mention. First of all, Harley Reid just looks super fit coming out of the midfield. I think he had around 19, 20 touches, kicked obviously a really nice goal drifting forward. Didn't give away too many free kicks. There were a few silly brain fades, but just that competitiveness was there. He was covering the ground really well, which was something that was really evident to the eye. Often last year, you could see him labouring from contest to contest and sort of just floating around the centre of the ground, just trudging along, playing with his headband, not really doing much just through the lack of fitness. And obviously there were a couple of reasons for that, just through the lack of pre-season and having to carry the midfield. But it was really positive to see him covering the ground really well, as was his right-hand man in that midfield, Tom McCarthy. T-Mac looks every bit of that transition midfielder that we've been crying out for, probably since the Luke Shuey, Dom Sheed, Andrew Gaff sort of era where we had some of those accumulators. He looks like he's going to be able to find the footy and use it really well throughout the midfield. No dramas, obviously coming up against the likes of Sarong, Brayshaw, Hayden Young. Although they weren't going 100%, he definitely didn't look out of place. Kicked a ripper goal from about 80 metres out too, which was nice, and just showed his class with the ball in hand. He only found it about 15 times, but again, it was a very congested sort of hit out. The wind was obviously playing a big factor, and I think that he'll be able to get on the spread a little bit more, pick up some of those marks in general play. But what we saw in the contest was really, really positive. So expect that disposal count to just about double in season. And I think that he's going to be one of our most important players this year, which is really exciting. Dev Rob was in at that first centre bounce as well. So we had T-Mac, Harley and Dev Robertson at the first bounce, bringing that more defensive flavour to the midfield. And he just looked really hungry. I think he had it about 19 times, laid about 4 tackles, took a mark and splitting his time between the wing and the midfield group, but just showed a real tenacity for the contest, a willingness to chase. I don't know how many times I saw him put his head down and chase after Fremantle when they got on a fast break. And he was one of the players that was leading the way in that regard, which is obviously something that we knew we were getting when we picked him up. So really encouraging signs. I think Jack Graham probably does push him out of the midfield when he comes back, but it wouldn't shock me if Dev can sort of fight his way into that role. Obviously, we know that he didn't quite get a look in at Brisbane, but that's to be expected with some of the stars they've got there. But he just brings something different. I think Fridge is obviously a really good endurance runner. So is Dev, but Dev has the pace that Jack Graham sort of lacks. So if he can play with 70-80% of the heart and the toughness and provide that sort of contested stopgap that we know that Jack Graham brings, if he can do that with his pace and really plays within his limits as well with ball in hand, which I liked, doesn't make many bad decisions, I can see him carving out a role for himself off his own bat rather than just being in there through someone else's injury. So that was a really promising sign. I think he's going to be a good addition. Tim Kelly coming off the bench, rotating as the first rotation into the midfield. Such a luxury. He got fairly busy, found it about 22, 25 times, and he was our leading possession getter on the field, which was a really promising sign to see from Tim. If that can sort of be his role, coming in as that second rotation, you're up against the second choice midfielders for the other team as well. So I think that might be the play. He definitely didn't do his round one chances any harm, and it was just good to see him back finding the footy, getting creative by hand and by foot. And yeah, he looked really good from what I saw of him. And then Elliot Yeo also making the move forward, but then coming into the midfield as that second rotation, just really preying on Fremantle's second choice midfield. I think that's going to be potentially a masterstroke. Bringing Elliot Yeo to the forward line, super powerful, and he demands attention both in the air and at ground level. So that's really good in its own right. And it adds a sort of X factor to the forward line that apart from Jake Waterman, we don't really have. With that experience, X factor, it just makes defenders sweat. But then he's fresh when he goes into the midfield and he can impact the contest to a really high level, which we know is his bread and butter. So I think it makes sense. He was a little bit rusty with his shots on goal. Took some good marks though. He sort of got in the way of Jake Waterman a little bit, which you see them stand next to each other and they're almost eye to eye. I think Elliot Yeo's 191 centimetres and Jake Waterman's 192. And when you've got Jobe, Archer Reid, CDT all floating around there as well. It is quite a tall forward line, so probably one of the tallest in the comp if you go by average height with Yowie down there. So it's going to take a little while for all these guys to gel. One of them might get shaken out. I think Archer Reed could probably make way if we think that it's too tall, but at this stage, that's the way it's lining up, and I really just like that move in isolation with Yowie going in there. As for the tall forwards, Cooper Duff-Tyler was really impressive, I thought. He just showed enough glimpses that we could see sort of what we've been hearing from the track, but seeing it up against Fremantle, who have a pretty strong defence, it was just really encouraging. Obviously, kicked a nice goal. His foot skills around the ground were really good. Didn't shirk the contest at all. Went into the ruck against Luke Jackson and obviously didn't quite have him beaten for hit-outs, but in general play, he really held his own. Obviously, that run-down tackle was amazing and probably my highlight of the whole game, seeing him just chase down the bloke that he's been compared to all the way through his draft journey. So it's hard to keep the lid on that one. Obviously, elite pace, got a good leap on him, and that physicality too. It's going to serve him well at the level. Job showed enough to sort of just give him that tick. And head him into round one, I think that we can expect a little bit more from him. Obviously, the wind was sort of wreaking havoc, and with our foot skills being suboptimal as it is, throwing in that wind dynamic just made it really hard for our key forwards. And so I think we saw them struggle a little bit. That won't be the case in round one, obviously, with a more widespread open ground and hopefully the wind conditions a little bit better. So I think we can tick them off. As for the back line, I think that they held up really well. Ryan Marrick, Sandy Brock, just to name a few. Rhett Buzzo as well did some good things. And when you looked at the scoreboard and saw that they held Fremantle's stacked forward line to just 33 points at halftime, you'd be excused for thinking that the full-strength Eagles backline was out there. But we were missing a handful of our most important players, all from the backline, with Liam Baker, Brandon Starcevich, Ruben Jinby, Brady Hoff, and Liam Duggan. That's 5 of our better players, 5 of our most senior players, and a big core part of our leadership group. So seeing that made me feel really safe about where our defensive stocks are at. Obviously, it's one of the most important lines for a rebuilding side, but I think it was also helped by the midfield just having a little bit more clearance dominance. It wasn't just a flood of inside forward 50 entries, which we've come to expect from our midfield just getting touched up. So it starts in the midfield, as it always does for every football team, and I thought that that definitely had an impact on the way that our defence was able to set up and defend. Running out of the back line, Josh Lindsay and Ryan Marrick were really good with ball in hand. It looks like Ryan's really gone to work and tidied up his kicking, which was nice. And Josh Lindsay made a couple of mistakes. It's just going to take him a little bit of time to get used to the level. Obviously, he's been so dominant off half back at the junior level, and he's been able to pierce kicks where they probably shouldn't have gone. And now the opposition that he's playing against are able to cut it off a little bit easier and defend a little bit better. So it's going to take him a little while to get used to that, but I still think it was promising signs. And we saw a few times where he just looked unreal with the foot skill, and he has a really nice sort of signature ball drop, and I think we're just going to get so used to seeing that. He took some kick-outs and showed everything that we wanted to see from him, so I was really pleased with the way that the back line held up. And then how could I get so far without talking about Willem Dersma? Out on that wing, he was absolutely everywhere to start off that first quarter, kicked that booming goal in the really tough wind conditions as well, just to sort of announce himself. And from what I've been hearing, that's exactly what he's been showing at training, just absolutely everywhere with his run and dash, always getting a fingertip in, just so lanky and able to affect the contest with his sort of physical makeup, and then on the spread, really damaging with his athletic traits. Got a lovely kick on him as well. At times he can make some frustrating errors, but I'm sure he'll be able to clean that up, and he's shown that he's clinical around goal, obviously kicking a few outside forward 50 goals over the last couple of weeks just to get everyone excited. So that was really promising to see as well. And then just also a shout out to Jacob Newton too, who I thought had a really good day. Obviously opportunities can be hard to come by as that small forward, but when he got his opportunity, he kicked a really nice goal, and he had some moments in the contest too, which was really good. Obviously he's not the tallest bloke out there, but he uses his size to his advantage, and he's a little angry ant in the contest. So I thought that he played really well, and it looks like he's going to be a lock for round one. So those were some of the players that really stood out to me. As for the positives in terms of game style, I think the foot skill definitely looked a lot better. It still let us down at stages with some poor turnovers, but it was nowhere near as much of a feature as what we've seen in the past. Obviously, the fast start was a real positive, and something that I think we can really make a theme of this year. Teams are going to underestimate us. We come up against good teams. They're not going to come to play right from the first bounce. That's fair enough. So if we can capitalize on that and get a little bit of a jump like we did to Fremantle, and then just try and hold on to these leads, it's going to see us be more competitive. So we need to be a fast starting side, and I think that was largely led by Harley and T-Mac out of the midfield, which was really good to see. I thought the boys looked pretty fit. A few people were concerned about us not being able to run out the game, but I just urge everyone to remember that that is one of the main objectives for these match sims. Obviously, you want to test out your game plan and see how your players are moving, who's in line for round one, how the game plan stacks up against opposition that don't know what you're trying to implement. But at the same time, just getting that match fitness up. Anyone who's played footy knows that you can do all the preseason in the world that you like, but you get out for your first preseason hit out and you just absolutely gassed 5-10 minutes in. So nothing can really replicate playing a full game of footy like playing a full game of footy. So usually it takes until the first couple of rounds until you get up and rolling. And so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. From what I saw, it looked like the boys all covered the ground really well. And the physicality was a real standout to me. The boys were pretty happy to put their body on the line and produce some big hits, which I just love to see. So as a rebuilding side, you got to make these good teams earn it. And that's definitely what we did. You don't want to be fun to play against. You might not have the top end class to compete with the best, but if you can just sort of bring that mongrel trademark game style, it makes you hard to play against, even if you don't have the top end class, which is just going to come with time. So I think that they were some of my key positives in terms of the way the game was played. Some of the negatives, I thought for stages there, I was going to be able to declare that we've sort of put the big lapses behind us. But obviously after quarter time, we struggled to score for the majority of the rest of the match. And that last quarter definitely was a little bit of a smack in the guts. But at the same time, the boys are just getting up match fitness and also probably wanted to come out of it unscathed. You see a teammate like Noah Long go down and you think, geez, that could be me. So obviously we pulled out some of our better players toward that last quarter. And I think the intensity from us sort of did drop off a notch. But then on the flip side, you look at Fremantle and I think they were cruising for most of the game in those first 3 quarters. And then definitely in that last quarter, they made an effort of putting the hammer down and trying to run out the game to a really high standard. Obviously they're aiming for finals, top 4, top 6 contention this year. So that's a big theme for them. And as I touched on right at the top, teams are trying to get different things out of this match sim. And I don't think Freo would have been overly happy that they had to come up against a lowly West Coast in match sim. But for our boys, it was awesome to get that hit out against one of the premier sides in the comp and one of the premier young sides as well, really showing us what's required to get to that level. So overall, pretty good day. Let me know how you felt about it in the comments. Who were your biggest standouts and what did you like? What didn't you like? Obviously, we have that official preseason match coming up against Port this weekend, which is going to be a better look again to the way that the boys are shaping up against some pretty reasonable opposition. I don't think Port are going to be the strongest of sides this year, but they've obviously got a really strong core midfield, so that's going to be a great test for us. To my knowledge, I don't think that there's going to be unlimited rotations and extended match squads, so we'll get a little bit more of a proper in-season game feel to that one, and it'll be, again, just a really good benchmark to see where we're at. So that's obviously something to look forward to. Also got some exciting news to share with you guys soon, hopefully regarding the podcast. So I've had a few discussions over the last couple of weeks and getting the ball rolling on something. So hopefully that's not too far away. Make sure you jump over to Instagram and follow along. We're closing in on 5,500 over there, which is really exciting. I try and put everything you need all in the one place there for you guys. So hope you enjoyed. Find us on Instagram. Drop a 5-star rating on Spotify. Like the video. Drop a comment. Make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube as well. If you want to support Golden Wings, that's a great way to do it. YouTube is finally going to monetize us and start paying us for the work that we do once we hit that 1,000 subscriber mark. So if you want to help out, that's a completely free and very easy way to show your support. Much appreciated, guys. Have a great week. I'll chat to you soon.